YouTube, what is good? So I didn't want to like it. I really didn't want to, but I do. But I'm kind of left with some like mixed emotions about this lens, about Fujifilm. Let me explain. This is the Fujifilm 8 to 16mm 2.8 lens. It's Fujifilm's new ultra wide angle lens that they introduced last year. It's basically their pro level ultra wide to match up with their contemporaries like Nikon, Canon. Nikon has the 14 to 24mm 2.8, which is one of my favorite lenses that I own next to my Sigma 35mm 1.4. Basically every video you see on this YouTube channel is filmed using my Nikon D810 and that 14 to 24mm, including this video right here. But my dream has always been for Fujifilm to release their own version of that lens, a low aperture 2.8 ultra wide, so in certain situations I could mimic the look that I get with my Nikon D810 on a smaller body with a slightly smaller lens. This is still a pretty big lens. So in today's video, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go through my pros and my cons after using this lens for about a week. I made some photos with it. I made a vlog with it. I'm gonna explain what I like, what I dislike, and give you my final thoughts at the end of the video. Is this lens worth $2,000? Carries a pretty hefty price tag. So first off, we're going to talk about the pros, what I like about this lens. And while I'm talking about this, we're going to show some behind the scenes of when I went out to shoot the other day. You'll just see me using the camera while I talk, and you'll also see some of the photos that I made. I was very impressed with these images. So the first positive about this lens is how wide it is. It is 8mm, which is a 12mm equivalent. Fujifilm essentially made this lens as wide as they possibly could, and I appreciate that. And one thing that comes with ultra wide angle lenses is distortion. This lens doesn't really have any. It has some stretching in the corners and the top and bottom, which are to be expected with a lens this wide. I think the Canon 12mm also has some stretching. Basically, like your head will look long and you'll look kind of weird in the corners. But like I said, that is to be expected. What is most important, this lens does not bend lines. The lines stay straight. The straight lines is what you want. Now, I did have Fujifilm's other wide angle lens, the 10 to 24 f4 previously. I had it and sold it, and the distortion on that lens was not good. You had kind of, crazy horizons. If you did a cityscape, some of the buildings might be curved. It just was not ideal. I just couldn't handle it. It was too much distortion. Obviously, another benefit to this lens is the 2.8 aperture. You can shoot in more low light situations, concert photography, wedding photography. 2.8 is a big deal. It's a lot more light into your lens. Once again, compared to that 10 to 24 f4. F4 is less than ideal for getting a lot of light in your lens, obviously. But one other thing that comes with f4 is the potential depth of field and bokeh, especially wide open. Shooting with this at 8, 10, 12mm at f2.8, you can get some pretty decent bokeh and depth of field, as opposed to the f4 version where you were going to get less unless you really brought it up more towards that 24mm range on that lens. So another thing with this is because of that low aperture and because of the ability to get that shallow depth of field, if you are someone like me who makes vlogs, is out shooting out in the field, you can get that separation between you and the background, which is very nice. It's one thing, once again, I love about my Nikon 14 to 24 that now I can get on my Fujifilm as well. So that is a great thing. I realize it doesn't necessarily pertain to everyone. Not everyone is vlogging. Not everyone cares about the backdrop being blurry behind them. But for me, I do care. I want that blurry background, and this gets it done. It also gets it done in photos if that is something you find yourself needing. I don't really do that a lot. You don't really need bokeh at 12mm, but it is nice to know that it's there if you need it with that 2.8 aperture. Now, one other thing that pertains to me that might not affect the normal person is the size of this lens. I actually find it as a positive, where the majority of Fujifilm users are probably going to find it as a negative. They're going to think this thing's too big, too heavy. But for me, like I said, as someone who's used to a DSLR background, the Nikon 810 14 to 24, that is a massive, huge setup, where this is still pretty big, but it's a little bit more manageable and a little bit easier to use. I was able to put the camera in my hoodie pocket, get it in and out comfortably, and I feel like I'd be able to take this into a lot of situations where I might not want to bring my Nikon. So that's definitely a pro for me, but I can understand why there be a lot of people, potentially the majority of people, who think this lens is too big. It's definitely all about how you're using the particular tool, being this lens. One other thing that I really like is the lens hood right here. I know you're thinking, dude, that doesn't matter, no one cares. This is nice. I like the real lens hood style design. My Nikon wide angle has this like slide on one that is constantly falling off, and this is just much more secure, and it's nice. And I would say the last positive is pretty obvious, which is image quality. It's a $2,000 lens filled with a lot of glass. You would expect the photos to be sharp and superb, and that is exactly what they are. I was very impressed with the test photos I made using this lens, and yeah, it honestly exceeded my expectation as far as image quality went. I was very, very satisfied with how they looked. But now let's get into some of the negatives on this lens, and there's really only a couple, but they're potentially big ones. So the first negative is pretty obvious, and that is the fact that this lens does not take filters easily. This doesn't just affect this lens, it affects almost all ultra wide angle lenses because you have this like bulbous front element right here. So if you want to use an ND filter or a polarizer, you're going to need to get some type of adapter. The reason it's more of a negative with this lens is because it's relatively new. I don't know how many options you have. I know a lot of manufacturers have talked about how they will be releasing filter kits for this lens. I just haven't done a ton of research on how many are actually out there at the moment. Another negative on this lens, kind of a big one, but I'm going to throw an asterisk on it and say I don't exactly know what was causing it. I don't know if it was the lens, if it was the camera, if it was me, user error. I don't know what was causing this. The negative is the fact that I have to figure out what was causing this issue. So I noticed at 8mm, at 10mm, on the very wide angles of this lens, I'd be making a photo, it said it was focused. The autofocus lit up. I thought I was good to go. Even at f8, high apertures where everything should be in focus, the depth of field isn't even shallow. Everything seemed in focus. I looked at the photo on the back of the camera. Everything looked good. When I got home and looked at the computer, the focus had pulled back very slightly. So the image was just a little bit out of focus. This happened to me a number of times while I was out shooting. I don't know if it's the lens. I don't know if it's the camera body. I don't know if it was something I was doing. The subject, the lighting, I have no idea. I just know it happened, and now I have to figure out why, and that is a potential negative. So if you're getting the lens, it could happen to you. It could not. It happened for me. So yeah, I got to figure it out. So it's a negative. So really, those are the two main negatives that I can think of with this lens. Now there's one other huge drawback, one mega negative that just stares you in the face when you look up and do research on this lens and when you think about buying one, and that's the price tag. $2,000 is a lot of money for a camera lens going on a non-full frame, non-medium format camera body. And I know you're going to say, you're like, oh, the X-Trans sensor is all special, blah, blah, blah. I get it. Let's not even get into that. It's just a lot of money. That's what it all boils down to. $2,000 is a huge investment. And I made a video a while back talking about my love-hate relationship with Fujifilm, where they seem to be doing things that I don't exactly understand why and how and what the plan is. Granted, I don't work at Fujifilm. I don't know their business strategy or their structure or whatever. It just seems like, to me, a huge percentage of the people who use Fujifilm cameras are going to have a very difficult time justifying purchasing a lens this expensive. And then at the time I'm filming this video, Fujifilm has this lens reduced in price by $500 as some type of special rebate, so it's $1,500. And I can't help but wonder, is there any way they could have just made the price closer to $1,500 at all times? I think it would make it a lot more accessible to a lot of people, but that's just my thoughts. The final thought for me, is it worth $2,000? No. For me, at least. There probably are some people out there who are more than willing to spend $2,000 on this lens, but for me, it's not worth it. But interestingly enough, $1,500, I'd consider it. Especially with the price going to $1,500, that means the resale market is probably going to have to stay below that now because of how this all worked out. So you'll probably be able to find one at like $12.50, and with that I say, yeah, that's much more reasonable. I could work in those ranges. It is a fantastic, superior, great lens. So I don't know. That's why I always kind of feel this like mixed emotion feeling with Fujifilm. They make great products, things that I like, but sometimes I don't know. Sometimes I just get confused as to what's going on. And this lens is like that for me. It's a lot of money, but it's great, but it's priced too high, but maybe they're doing it on purpose because it's discounted $500. I don't know. So let me know your thoughts in the comments on this Fujifilm 8 to 16 millimeter 2.8. I have a feeling I know what the answer is going to be. I think a lot of you are probably going to say it's ridiculously priced, but I'm sure a ton of you are just going to say it's too big. I think that's the other drawback to this for the majority of Fujifilm users, but like I said, for me, I'm kind of a special case. So price and the size are probably going to be the main drawbacks on this one. Let me know your thoughts, like I said, in the comments. If you tried it out, if you're thinking about it, if you like it, you hate it. That's all I got to say about this lens. If you enjoyed today's video, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button for more photography videos. Y'all are the truth. We got a new vlog coming sometime this week, probably Thursday or Friday in there. So stay tuned for that. See you next time.